Well, we're here today with Senator Bernie Moreno from the great state of Ohio. Thank you for being here. We are in the AFPI Studios, and we're going to have a conversation about illegal immigration, national security, but more importantly, affordability and how it really affects every American, not just those living on the border. So it's great to have you here in the studios.
No, thank you for having me. We're in a great place.
Great. Well, obviously, we know for 4 years under the Biden administration, the border was wide open. We had anywhere between 12 and 20. I don't think we really know how many folks came across that border illegally. But in just 10, 11 short months, President Trump and his team have been able to get that under control. Talk to us about why that's so important and really what you see, how the progress they can keep going for the next 3 years.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, obviously, we clearly understand the national security implications of that kind of illegal migration at those numbers, at that scale. We've never seen it before. There's never been a time when you had over a 4-year period of time, somewhere between 10 to 20 million people. Nobody even knows, by the way. That's even the bigger problem, right? But Ohio is the 7th largest state in the country. We have 12 million people. So giving you a sense of this is probably would be the top 5 largest state in America added to the United States.
Crazy.
During a 4-year period. This isn't over 100 years, right? This is over a short period of time. So national security clear. But where does the affordability come in? Well, as I like to say to my colleagues, I would like to bring them supply and demand for dummies, right? So if you have housing stock that's decently stable, not massively growing, and all of a sudden you add 10 plus million people who need housing, what's going to happen to housing prices? So housing prices obviously went up. That's rent, availability of single-family homes, way up. Then you look at healthcare, which is the biggest single driver of inflation. And you'll hear the Democrats say, well, illegal migrants can't get Medicare, they can't get Medicaid, they can't get the Obamacare exchange. No, it's worse. They go into our hospitals and get treated for free.
Yeah.
Well, a hospital does. What do they do when they treat a patient for free? They have to raise the price for everybody else. And again, think about millions of people. And then, Chad, think about also the healthiness of those 10 to 20 million people. These are people who probably had all kinds of health problems. So they flood into our healthcare systems, raise the price. So you got huge issue with housing, huge issue with healthcare, automobiles. They need to get around. They're not taking public transportation necessarily. So what happens? They're buying used cars. Used car prices go up, right? So you got housing, you got healthcare, you got housing. Then what happens to food? Well, of course, SNAP benefits, welfare benefits that are intended to help American citizens. You have rising food prices because of that. So those are the implications of the affordability. I call it the big 4: housing, cars, healthcare, and food. The things that require that are required to be affordable to live a good American life.
Yeah, I mean, these are all such great points because, we talked about during the Biden term is the consequences for opening that border for between 12 and 20 million illegal aliens. That everyday Americans may not feel that strain right away, but they will feel it years later. And unfortunately, that's where we are today. We're years later, and everyday Americans, from a housing perspective, I think our Secretary for Housing and Urban Development just put out a report, I think a day or two ago, that talks about rents increasing, affordable housing, that just the supply is not where it needs to be because the demand is so high because of millions and millions of other individuals here that needing that. And that has a ripple effect for obviously your constituents in Ohio, but across the country. Now they're having to deal with this. And so it's hard at times, and I'm curious on how you do it in Congress when people say, well, we need to have sympathy for those that need to come here. And that we need, we're sort of this light and this beacon on the hill that we need to take in the world's refugees and things of that nature. And my response is, we first need to look after Americans. And the impact on healthcare, as you indicated, housing and alike, is real now. And you can't spin your way out of that with solutions. You've got to get the border under control, and then you got to remove individuals that don't have a legal right to be here.
Well, first of all, our duties to Americans,
right,
first and foremost. Stop, right? Elected leaders do not have a duty to anybody else.
Yeah.
We have to take care of American citizens first, period. But here's the deal. It isn't contradictory with immigration. It's contradictory with illegal
Correct.
migration. It's also contradictory with bringing that many low-skilled or unskilled workers who aren't willing to assimilate, don't know our language at one time in that kind of volume. Nowhere, no country can afford to have that much migration come in at one time. It's not possible. There's a big difference between, as you know, hey, we bring in 10 to 15 million people over 4 years, we bring in 200,000.
Yeah.
200,000 is absorbable if, by the way, they come here on our terms, want to assimilate, want to learn our language, are vetted, and by the way, aren't here to take benefits that are intended for American citizens. But the left, the extremists, they conflate both those issues.
Yeah.
And I would say one more thing: as a legal immigrant to this country, how about having some empathy for the people who are waiting in line?
Of course.
The people who are patiently applying, saying, "I'd like to come to America. This is why I'm learning the language. I could add to your economy this way or that way." Yeah. But we're not rewarding them. We're punishing the people waiting in line and rewarding the people who skip the line.
Yeah.
That's the ultimate insult. So I don't buy into any of these things. It has nothing to do with being anti-immigrant or racist or xenophobic. Those are the slurs that they use because they know they're morally bankrupt ideas.
Yeah. Well, you and I, before the cameras are rolling, we talked about how the left frames issues, right? And I think on this issue, the left, this is a perfect example because the left will always say, well, we need immigrants because they make America better. They contribute to our economy and they do all of that. So to your point, I would say yes, legal immigrants that are coming to the United States for what the U.S. determines it needs, right?
Exactly.
So different visas, high skill, low skill, whatever it may be, they're vetted, all of that. But what the left doesn't do, and I'm glad we're talking about it here today, is the reverse side of that impact on everyday Americans. They just sort of whitewash it and they don't talk about it to say, we've got real issues, not allowing 200,000 or 400,000 folks in, or even 1 million folks, which is kind of the average green cards that we do a year. It's 20 million over 4 years. The negative impact that we see here, and then I'll just say, and I'm curious to get your thoughts, we see this in Europe, right? We see this in the UK, particularly, the France, Sweden
now, which is
Sweden and others, is just an influx of individuals into those countries that don't care to assimilate and are drawing those public benefits and drawing resources against, French citizens, but American citizens here.
Yeah, well, look, at the end of the day, number one, the intention of immigration is never to say we want to put immigrants on our social safety net program.
Right.
That's insane.
Right.
Again, these are programs intended for American citizens who are down in their luck. And by the way, we have lots of Americans who are in need, and we should be focused on helping them. That's first and foremost. But there's another impact. So it's a double whammy for the American people. So obviously, affordability went absolutely out the window under Biden. Now, these things have long tails. You can't just say, okay, there's an election on November 5th, President Trump gets inaugurated January 20th, and snap our fingers, 20 million people are gone. By the way, we're trying to do that, and they're fighting us on deportation.
Right.
That's, of course, ironic there, too. But this has a long tail, so it takes a long time to fix these things, and we are over 2 million deportations. You're starting to see rents drop. You're starting to see car prices come down. You're starting to see some food prices come down. Healthcare was obviously broken by Obama, but we haven't fixed the issue of the fact that we have a lot of people in this country who do require a lot of health care that aren't American citizens that we're treating. I don't think it's even common sense to think that you and I could go to a foreign country and get free health care. That wouldn't be something that would ever cross our minds. Right. In fact, I think one of the things that we should do is if we treat a foreign national in one of our hospitals, I think we should backbill those countries and say, hey, look, we took care of your citizen. They didn't pay us for health care. You need to pay the bill because they shouldn't have been in our country demanding free health care. That's just kind of wild, right?
Yeah.
So those are the things. But here's the double whammy. Wages go down.
Yeah.
So imagine affordability is going up. Right, affordability's prices are going up, and then wages. Why are wages going down? Because these are workers that are willing to work for lower money, with worse conditions. So you hear all the time. I hear from business people all the time. Oh, nobody's willing to do these jobs.
Right.
Oh yeah,
right.
Not for that wage,
right.
And not for those conditions. So imagine the American worker sees their wages go down, and then their taxpayer dollars are used to help the person who just made their wages go down. and you wonder why American workers upset.
Yeah.
Well, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, and I think President Trump's done a great job. I mean, he talks about the American worker almost, not in every speech, and not in all remarks, but almost. And so the national security strategy that was just released, actually, I mean, it's a foreign policy document, but it talks about the American worker. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I also hear this. I hear this a lot, saying, well, there's jobs here that just no American wants to do. Well, again, if you pay them a good wage, they're happy to do that. But if you have an influx of foreign labor, illegal foreign labor, I should add, they're going to continue to drive those wages down and take American jobs.
Yeah, imagine those employers are saying, well, look, I can't get Americans to do this job. That's not true. It's almost like this idea that they have empathy for illegals. That's total nonsense. They want slave wages. I actually think about it as the Democrats haven't gotten over that Republicans got rid of slavery. So let's bring in these illegal migrants. They basically treat them like modern-day slaves.
Yeah.
They come in like modern-day slaves. If you saw firsthand when you were the secretary, the way these people are treated along the journey
it's awful.
is the most cruel
yeah.
conditions known to mankind. I mean, it is awful. So they're treated like garbage when they come into the U.S., and then they go to employers who isn't because they have empathy for them. They just want people to do jobs that Americans won't do with those conditions at those wages. And then who has to take care of the people? Because you can't live here on $5 an hour, working 60 hours a week with no overtime. So, of course, they have to be on social safety net programs like housing and food, et cetera, because the employer isn't taking care of them. So this is the obvious situation, which is Biden enabled modern-day slavery. By the way, modern-day slavery, a modern-day sex trade, which had never been at this scale, a modern-day child trafficking operation had never been at this scale. And the Democrats turn an eye and they accuse Republicans of being racist and xenophobic when they're the ones that are treating immigrants with this kind of cruelty. And, of course, punishing American citizens who dare speak to say, hey, why are my wages dropping? Why are my costs going up? It seems like it's because you brought in 20 million illegals. And the Democrats sit there and go, what do you mean? That doesn't make sense. Bringing 20 million people in this country would never raise housing costs. No, because they're intense. Of course you're going to raise housing costs.
Of course. I mean, we saw President Biden give them billions of dollars of grant money, right? Put them up in hotels, put them up in apartment buildings and the like, because they don't have the ability to be self-sufficient. Right? If you're here illegally, you can get a work authorization, but it's tough to work, right? Or you have to work under the table. You have to do all these different things. So,
and you work under the table for much lower wages.
Absolutely.
Much lower. You're not paying into Social Security.
Right.
You're not paying into Medicaid or Medicare. Of course, the employer is great because, remember, the employer's not paying into those programs either. They're not paying into Social Security. So it's a great deal for employers. Again, it's modern-day slavery. But take the hotel example you just said, because that was a big piece of that we forget. You know, Americans have very short memories. There was a time and place in which Joe Biden was putting these illegal migrants in the luxury hotels in New York. The Roosevelt Hotel is probably the best example. We were paying almost $10,000 a month.
It's crazy.
A month per migrant. So imagine you're a working American. You can't afford to pay $1,000 for your own apartment.
Right.
And then you look over and you see that these illegals who are lowering their wages are getting a luxury hotel room. The entire hotel was filled, as you know. So they started doing that. They started filling up all these hotels. So they took the supply of hotel rooms down.
Right.
What do you think happened to hotel prices in New York? Of course they went up. They shot through the roof. Who does that affect? Americans. So look, these policies are so patently absurd that you wonder how they get away with it. And the way is because they have a propaganda machine called the media that absolutely just tarnishes everybody with you're a racist, you're xenophobic, you hate immigrants. They try to say that to me. And I say, I actually love immigrants because myself and my family members literally are immigrants. And I love them.
Right.
So it's just such nonsense.
Yeah.
But look, at the end of the day, we got to push back. Thank you for what you guys are doing here, pushing this back on us.
Well, thank you for being here. I think it's such an important topic because I think for too long, and President Trump was focused on this going into the election last year and certainly during these the first 10 or 11 months of his administration, which is you've got to secure the border against national security threats. And I think he's done a great job of doing that. And then you've got to remove people that don't have a legal right to be here. And we see the left pushing back and saying it's how terrible it is. But what we haven't done a great job is having this conversation is why should everyday Americans, my mother who sits in Mississippi, that there may or may not be a huge illegal immigrant population there, but why should she care? Because it's affecting all the different housing, medical, all these different other aspects of her everyday life. So I hope you keep talking about this because I think it's really important. Thank you for being here. Thanks for being at AFPI and sharing the message, and we appreciate all the work you're doing.
No, absolutely. Well, by the way, thank you for the work AFPI does.
Yeah.
Because you're out there at the front lines spreading this information and make sure people know the facts. Just here it all is. Look, it's again, I go back to the beginning. Supply and demand.
Yeah.
You raise demand artificially because you bring in all these people. Supply stays the same. You're going to see higher prices.
Right.
So what we're doing is we're reducing the amount of illegals in this country. We're working to improve productivity. We're raising Americans' real wages, but it's going to take some time. And I understand that Americans are not feeling the relief and the speed in which they're doing, but just know that that is our total and complete focus every day here in D.C., and I know it's President Trump's total and complete focus.
And it's AFPI's as well. So we look forward to working with you throughout the course of next year and beyond.
Thank you, Chad.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right.